The bell above the diner door barely finished ringing before the room went quiet. A uniformed cop stepped in, eyes scanning once, then locking onto two black men sitting in a corner booth like they didn't belong in his world. "Get out," he said, loud enough for every plate and coffee cup to hear. "We don't serve your kind here." No one moved. Not the waitress, not the old men at the counter, not the couple by the window. 12 people heard it and chose silence. One of the men tightened his grip on his fork, jaw set. But the other, he didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just folded his napkin, calm, steady, like he'd been here before. Then he did something small, so small no one noticed. He turned his phone face down on the table and tapped it once. The cop thought he was in control, thought this was just another morning, another warning, another pair of men he could push out without consequence. He had no idea. Every word he'd just said was already being recorded. And before this is over, that quiet man in the booth, he's going to make sure the whole town hears it. The bell above the diner door gave a tired little jingle as it swung open. The sound swallowed almost immediately by the low hum of conversation and the steady clink of silverware against ceramic plates. Morning light pushed through the dusty front windows in long golden streaks, catching on floating specks in the air like something out of a memory that didn't want to fade. Ethan Brooks stepped inside first, pausing just long enough to let the door settle behind him. He took in the room without turning his head too much. Old habit. Red vinyl booths cracked along the seams, a counter lined with swivel stools, most of them occupied by men who had probably been coming here for years. Coffee mugs refilled without asking, waitresses who knew names, orders, and stories. Leon Carter followed a half step behind, taller, broader, his presence harder to ignore even when he tried. He kept his hands relaxed at his sides, though his eyes moved more openly than Ethan's, scanning faces, exits, reflections in the chrome trim. Nobody greeted them. Not exactly. A few heads turned. Just for a second. Long enough to register two unfamiliar faces. Long enough to notice skin before anything else. Then, like a quiet agreement passed around the room, everyone went back to their food. Ethan didn't react. He simply nodded once to himself and walked toward a booth near the window, the vinyl sighing under his weight as he sat down. Leon slid in across from him, the table between them scratched and worn smooth by years of elbows and coffee cups. A waitress approached, her shoes soft against the tile floor. She was young, maybe early 20s, her name tag reading Megan. She held two menus but hesitated just a fraction of a second before setting them down. "Morning," she said, voice polite but thin. "Morning," Ethan replied, easy like he'd said it 1,000 times in 1,000 places just like this. They ordered simply. Coffee, eggs, pancakes. Nothing that took up space. Nothing that drew attention. Megan scribbled it down quickly, nodded, and left before the silence could stretch too far. Leon leaned back slightly, eyes drifting toward the window where a pickup truck rumbled past, gravel crunching under its tires. "You feel that?" he murmured, low enough that it barely reached across the table. Ethan reached for the sugar jar, pouring a measured stream into his coffee. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I feel it." It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It never was. It was in the way conversations dipped just a little when they spoke. The way forks paused mid-air, then resumed like nothing had happened. The way the room held its breath without admitting it was doing so. Leon picked up his fork, tapping it once against the plate that hadn't arrived yet. "Same as always," he muttered. Ethan didn't answer. He just lifted his coffee, blew lightly across the surface, and took a careful sip. On the table beside his hand, his phone rested face down. At some point, without drawing attention to it, he slid it an inch closer to the center. His thumb brushed along the edge, light, almost absent-minded. Then he left it there. The bell above the door rang again. This time the sound didn't fade. It cut. A shift moved through the diner like a ripple through still water. Conversations didn't stop, but they changed. Shoulders straightened, voices lowered. Someone at the counter set his mug down a little too carefully. Officer Grant Miller stepped inside. He didn't rush. He never did. His boots hit the tile in a slow, deliberate rhythm that carried authority without needing to announce it. Sunlight caught on the badge pinned to his chest, then slid across the dark lenses of the sunglasses pushed up on his head. He didn't look at the counter, didn't greet anyone, didn't nod to the regulars who knew his name and his habits. His eyes moved once across the room and stopped, right on the corner booth, on Ethan, on Leon. There was no confusion in his expression, no curiosity, just recognition of something he had already decided. He walked toward them. Each step seemed louder than the last, even though the room hadn't gone quiet. It just felt like it had. Leon saw him coming first. His grip tightened around the fork, knuckles paling just enough to notice if you were looking for it. Ethan set his coffee down slowly. Grant stopped at the edge of their booth. He didn't sit, didn't lean, just stood there, looking down at them like they were something out of place. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then he did. "The hell are you two doing in here?" The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They landed heavy enough on their own. Ethan looked up at him, calm, steady. "Having breakfast," he said. Grant's lip curled, just slightly. He glanced at the plates that hadn't even been served yet, then back at Ethan. "Yeah," he said. "That's not happening." Leon shifted in his seat. "We ordered—" Grant cut him off with a small flick of his hand, like brushing away a fly. "I wasn't talking to you." The room held its breath again. Megan stood behind the counter now, coffee pot in hand, frozen mid-step. An older man at the far end of the counter stared down at his eggs like they suddenly required his full attention to understand. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Grant took a half step closer to the table. "You heard me," he said, voice flattening into something colder. "Get up." Ethan didn't move. For a second, it looked like he might say something else, might ask a question, might push back just enough to make this about more than it was. But he didn't. He just met Grant's eyes and waited. Grant's jaw tightened. He shifted his weight, the leather of his belt creaking softly. "I don't know where you think you are," he went on, louder now, making sure the whole room could hear. "But this ain't your spot." Leon's fork scraped lightly against the table as his hand moved. Ethan's foot tapped his once under the table. A signal. Hold. Grant leaned forward slightly, just enough to close the space. "Get out," he said. A pause. Then, slower, clearer, each word placed like it mattered more than the last. "We don't serve your kind here." The sentence hung in the air. It didn't echo. It didn't need to. It settled into the walls, into the floor, into every person sitting there pretending they hadn't just heard it. Megan turned away, busying herself with something that didn't exist. The old man at the counter took a long sip of coffee he didn't taste. A couple near the window exchanged a quick glance, then looked down at their plates. Nobody spoke. Ethan's expression didn't change. Not anger, not surprise, just something quieter, older. He reached for his napkin, folded it once, and placed it neatly beside his untouched place setting. Then he looked back up at Grant. Calm, measured, like he had all the time in the world. And outside, beyond the dusty glass, a truck rolled past, the morning carrying on like nothing had just shifted inside that room. But it had, and whether anyone wanted to admit it or not, something had just begun. Who decides who belongs, when no one else is willing to say a word? The words didn't fade after they were spoken. They lingered, settling into the cracks of the diner like grease that had soaked too deep into the walls to ever come out. Ethan held Grant Miller's gaze for a long, quiet moment. Then, slowly, he leaned back against the booth. "We're just eating breakfast," he said. His voice didn't rise. It didn't challenge. It simply existed, calm, steady, like he was stating a fact that didn't need permission. Grant let out a short, humorless breath. "I don't remember asking what you were doing," he replied. "I told you what you're going to do." Leon shifted in his seat, his fork still in his hand. The metal bent slightly under the pressure of his grip, a quiet reminder of the strength he was holding back. "Man, we paid for—" Ethan's foot pressed lightly against Leon's again. Not hard, just enough. Leon stopped. His jaw tightened, muscles jumping under his skin, but he didn't say another word. Grant noticed. His eyes flicked between them, picking up on the exchange. A faint smirk touched his lips, like he enjoyed seeing the tension stretched thin. "Yeah," he said, nodding slowly. "That's right. You listen to him. Smart move." Behind the counter, Megan picked up a coffee pot and moved toward another table, even though the cups there were already full. Her hands trembled just enough that the liquid inside the pot rippled. At the far end, the old man at the counter adjusted his hat, his eyes still locked on his plate like it might offer him a way out of the moment. No one spoke, no one interrupted. The room stayed suspended in that same quiet, as if everyone had agreed without saying it that silence was safer. Ethan reached forward, sliding his coffee cup an inch closer. The ceramic made a soft scraping sound against the table. "Officer," he said, polite, measured. "Is there a problem?" Grant's expression hardened. "The problem," he said, "is you two sitting here like you belong." Leon let out a slow breath through his nose. Ethan nodded once like he'd heard something important. "I see," he said. But he didn't move. That was the thing. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't give Grant anything to push against. He just stayed. Grant's patience cracked just a little. "You deaf?" he snapped. "I said get up." Ethan's hand drifted across the table, resting lightly beside his phone. His fingers brushed the edge again, subtle, almost absent. Then he folded his hands together. "We haven't done anything wrong," he said. Grant leaned down slightly, bringing his face closer, his voice dropping just enough that it felt more dangerous. "I don't need you to do something wrong," he said. "I just need you gone." The words hung there, colder than before. Leon looked past Grant for a second, toward the counter, toward the people who were pretending not to watch. His eyes landed on Megan. For just a second, she looked back at him. There was something there. Guilt, maybe, or fear, or both. Then she turned away again. Leon swallowed, hard. Ethan saw it all without turning his head. "Sir," Ethan said, still calm, "we're customers, same as anyone else in here." Grant straightened up, rolling his shoulders slightly, like he was preparing himself for something. "No," he said, "you're not." That word, no, landed heavier than anything else he'd said. It wasn't just disagreement. It was dismissal. A rewriting of reality right there in the middle of the room. Leon's fork hit the table with a soft clink as he set it down. "That's not how this works," he muttered. Grant's head snapped toward him. "Oh, you want to tell me how it works?" he said, voice rising now. "Go ahead. I'd love to hear it." Leon opened his mouth. Ethan's hand moved. Not fast, not dramatic, just a small shift, his fingers pressing lightly against the table. Leon stopped again. The silence stretched tighter. Ethan looked up at Grant, his expression unchanged. "We're not causing any trouble," he said. "We ordered, we're sitting, we're minding our business." Grant laughed, short and sharp. "Your business," he said, "is the problem." A chair scraped somewhere behind them. Someone shifted, then stilled again, as if they'd almost made a decision, and then thought better of it. Ethan let out a quiet breath. Then he reached for his wallet. Not suddenly, slowly, deliberately. 2 fingers first, easing it out from his jacket pocket, placing it on the table without opening it. Grant's eyes dropped to it, then back up to Ethan. "What's that?" he asked. "My ID," Ethan said. "You want to see it?" Grant hesitated for half a second. Then he held out his hand. "Yeah," he said. "I do." Ethan slid the wallet across the table. Leon did the same a moment later, his movements a little less smooth, a little more tense. Grant picked them both up, flipping them open with practiced ease. He examined them like they might reveal something hidden if he stared long enough. "Out of state," he muttered. "Passing through," Ethan said. Grant snorted. "Yeah," he said. "That's what they all say." He closed the wallets and set them back down on the table, but not within reach, just far enough that Ethan would have to lean forward to get them. A small thing, but not really. "Here's what's going to happen," Grant said, louder now, making sure the whole diner could hear again. "You two are going to get up, walk out that door, and keep walking until you're out of my town." Leon's shoulders tensed. "And if we don't?" he asked. Grant's smile came back, thinner this time. "Then we do this the hard way." The room seemed to shrink around them. Ethan glanced down at the wallets sitting just out of reach, then back up at Grant. His eyes didn't show anger or fear, just something steady, something that didn't move even when everything around it did. He reached forward, slowly, not for the wallets, for his coffee. He lifted it, took another sip, then set it back down with care. Grant watched him, his expression tightening. Ethan met his gaze again. "We're not leaving," he said. The words were quiet, but they landed like a line drawn in the middle of the room. Leon felt it. So did Grant. So did everyone listening without admitting they were. For a second, nothing happened. Then Grant's hand came down on the table. Not hard enough to break anything, just enough to make the plates rattle. "That wasn't a suggestion," he said. Ethan didn't flinch. "I understand," he replied. Grant leaned in again, closer than before. "Good," he said. "Then stand up." Outside, a truck roared past, the sound bleeding through the thin glass windows. Inside, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody stepped in. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of eyes that refused to meet, full of people waiting to see what would happen next. Ethan placed both hands flat on the table. Then, slowly, he began to rise. Leon followed. Not because they were giving in, but because something deeper was unfolding. And no one in that diner, not even Grant Miller, understood what they had just stepped into. If no one speaks when it starts, how far does it go before someone finally does? The diner door opened with a dull creak as Ethan and Leon stepped outside, the bell giving one last hollow jingle behind them. The warmth of the room vanished instantly, replaced by the dry heat of late morning. The sunlight hit harder out here, reflecting off the gravel lot in sharp, blinding flashes. Officer Grant Miller followed close behind, his boots crunching deliberately against the ground, each step slow and measured, like he had nowhere else to be. "Right over there," he said, nodding toward the front of his patrol car parked crookedly across two spaces. The car wasn't just parked, it was positioned, blocking, controlling, owning the space. Ethan glanced at it once, then back at Grant. He didn't argue, he didn't hesitate. He simply walked. Leon followed, shoulders tight, every step carrying more weight than the last. His eyes flicked once toward the diner window. Faces were there now, not hidden anymore. Watching, waiting, still silent. The heat radiating off the hood of the patrol car shimmered in the air. Ethan could feel it before he even touched it. "Hands on the car," Grant said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Ethan placed his palms flat against the metal. The heat burned through instantly, but he didn't pull back, didn't react, just adjusted his stance slightly, steadying himself. Leon hesitated for half a second. Then he did the same. The silence outside felt different from inside. Out here, it wasn't just uncomfortable. It was exposed. There were no walls to hold it in, no ceiling to press it down. Just open air and the weight of what was happening. Grant circled behind them slowly, like he was inspecting something that didn't belong. "You boys said you're just passing through," he said casually. "Yes, sir," Ethan replied. Grant stopped behind Leon, close enough that Leon could feel his presence without seeing him. "Funny," Grant said. "We've had a couple of break-ins lately. Folks coming in from out of town, causing problems." Leon's jaw tightened. "We're not involved in anything like that," he said. Grant chuckled softly. "That's so?" he asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you fit the description." Ethan's eyes remained forward, fixed on the distant line of trees beyond the lot. "What description is that?" he asked. Grant didn't answer right away. He walked around to the front again, standing directly in front of them now, leaning lightly against the patrol car like he had all the time in the world. "Sure, you know what description," he said. The words weren't loud, but they landed heavier than anything else. Leon's fingers pressed harder against the hood. The heat bit deeper, but he didn't move. Ethan's breathing stayed even, controlled. "Sir," Ethan said, "we've cooperated with everything you've asked so far." Grant nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, "you have." Then his expression shifted. "But I'm not done." He straightened up and pointed toward their car parked a few spaces away, a plain, unremarkable sedan. "Pop the trunk." Leon turned his head slightly, just enough to glance at Ethan. Ethan didn't look back. "Do you have a reason to search the vehicle?" Ethan asked. Grant's smile faded. "I asked you to pop the trunk," he said. "And I'm asking," Ethan replied calmly, "if you have a legal reason." For the first time, Grant's patience cracked a little more. "I don't need a reason," he said. "Not here." The air tightened. Leon swallowed hard. "That's not how it works," he muttered. Grant took a step closer, his shadow falling across both of them. "Out here," he said, tapping the hood lightly with his finger. "This is exactly how it works." Ethan paused. just for a second. Then he shifted one hand off the hood, slowly, deliberately, reaching into his pocket. Every movement was controlled, visible, careful. Grant's posture stiffened. "Easy," Ethan said quietly. He pulled out a key fob and pressed the button. Across the lot, the trunk of their car clicked open with a soft, mechanical sound. Grant's shoulders relaxed just a fraction. "See?" he said. "Wasn't so hard." He walked over to the car, leaving Ethan and Leon standing there under the sun. Leon let out a slow breath through his nose. "You good?" he murmured under his breath. Ethan didn't turn. "I'm fine," he said. Grant lifted the trunk and began going through it without hesitation. A duffel bag, a jacket, a laptop case. Ordinary things. He pulled them out, unzipping, rifling, tossing them back like he was searching for something that would justify everything he'd already decided. Nothing. Of course, there was nothing. "Traveling light," Grant muttered. He slammed the trunk shut harder than necessary, the sound echoing across the lot. Then he walked back. Slower this time, more deliberate. He stopped in front of Ethan again, arms crossing over his chest. "You know what I think?" he said. Neither of them answered. "I think you two are running something," he continued. "Drugs, maybe. Stolen goods. Something you don't want me to find." Ethan finally turned his head slightly. "Or maybe," he said, "we're exactly what we told you we are." Grant stared at him, long enough that the moment stretched. Then he leaned in closer. "Here's the problem," he said quietly. "I don't believe you." Behind them, the diner door opened again. Megan stepped out onto the small porch, one hand gripping the railing. Her eyes flicked between the men, uncertainty written all over her face. She didn't step any closer, didn't say anything, just stood there, watching. Grant noticed her. His eyes shifted, just for a second, then back to Ethan. "Last chance," he said. The words dropped heavy into the heat. "You get in your car, you leave this town, and we forget this ever happened." Leon turned his head now, looking straight at Ethan. This time there was no question in his eyes, only tension, only the edge of something ready to break. Ethan straightened slowly, lifting his hands off the hood. The imprint of heat lingered on his palms, but he ignored it. He turned, fully now, facing Grant. "We're not leaving," he said. The words were quiet, but they cut clean through the air. Grant blinked once, like he hadn't expected that answer. Like for the first time, something wasn't going according to plan. Around them, the world seemed to hold still. Even the sound of passing traffic faded into the distance. Grant's expression hardened again. His hand drifted toward his belt. "Then you're making this a whole lot harder than it needs to be," he said. Ethan didn't move. Leon didn't move. The distance between them and Grant felt smaller now, tighter, more dangerous. And for a brief moment, it wasn't clear who actually had control anymore. When someone refuses to back down, is it courage, or is it because they know something you don't? The air felt heavier now, not because of the heat, but because something invisible had shifted between them. Grant Miller's hand hovered near his belt, fingers brushing against the edge of his radio, then lower, toward the cuffs, not touching. Not yet, but close enough to make the message clear. Leon saw it, his shoulders squared, instinct rising fast, like a reflex he'd spent years trying to control. His breath came in deeper now, slower but heavier, like he was forcing it down before it could turn into something else. Ethan didn't look at Grant's hand. He didn't need to. He had already seen it coming. "You're making a mistake," Ethan said quietly. Grant let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "No," he replied. "You're the ones making the mistake." Behind them, the diner door creaked open a little wider. More people had stepped onto the porch now. Not fully outside, not involved, just close enough to see clearly, without feeling like they had to do anything about it. A man in a work shirt leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Another stood behind him, peering over his shoulder. Megan hadn't moved far, still gripping the railing, her knuckles pale. Nobody said a word, but they were watching. Grant noticed, and something about that seemed to push him further. He stepped closer to Ethan, reducing the space between them to almost nothing. "Turn around," he said. Ethan didn't move. "Turn around." The second time, it came sharper. Leon's head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing. "On what grounds?" he asked. Grant's gaze snapped to him. "On my grounds," he said flatly. "That's not—" Ethan's voice cut in, calm but firm. "Leon." Just his name. That was enough. Leon closed his mouth, his jaw tightening again, as he forced himself back into stillness. Grant watched that exchange closely, like he was studying it, like he was trying to understand why one word carried that much weight. "You think you're in control here?" Grant said, his voice low again. Ethan met his eyes. "I think you're overstepping," he replied. Grant's patience snapped. His hand moved. Not to strike, not to escalate beyond control, but enough to cross a line that couldn't be unseen. He grabbed the front of Ethan's shirt, bunching the fabric in his fist, pulling him forward just slightly. Not hard, but intentional. Enough to humiliate. Enough to assert. The porch behind them shifted. Someone sucked in a breath, quick and quiet. Leon's entire body went rigid. For a split second, it looked like he might move. Like everything Ethan had been holding back inside him might break loose right there in the gravel lot. But Ethan didn't resist. He didn't push back. He didn't even raise his hands. He just let the moment exist. And that made it worse. Because Grant expected reaction, expected resistance, expected something he could justify. Instead, he got stillness, controlled, unshaken. Ethan looked down briefly at the hand gripping his shirt, then back up at Grant. "You don't have to do this," he said. Grant's grip tightened slightly. "Oh, I think I do," he replied. Then he let go, shoving Ethan back just enough to create space again. Ethan stepped back half a pace, regaining his balance without effort. Dust shifted under his shoes. Silence followed. Longer this time, thicker. Grant turned slightly, pacing a short line in front of them like he was recalibrating. "You know what your problem is?" he said suddenly. Neither of them answered. "You walk in here," he continued, "like you don't know how things work. Like you don't understand where you are." Ethan said nothing. Leon stared straight ahead. Grant pointed toward the diner. "That place?" he said. "Those people? They know. They understand. That's why they don't cause trouble." His voice dropped again. "But you two?" he added. "You think you're different." Ethan finally spoke. "No," he said. "We don't." Grant stopped pacing, then slowly turned back toward him. "Then why are you still here?" he asked. The question hung in the air. Simple, direct, but heavier than anything else so far. Ethan took a slow breath. Because this was the moment, the line, and everything after it would change the direction of what came next. He glanced past Grant for just a second, toward the diner window. The reflection caught his eye, the angle, the distance, everything exactly where it needed to be. Then he looked back at Grant. "Because we have the right to be," he said. Grant's expression darkened. "That's where you're wrong." His hand dropped fully to his belt now, resting, claiming authority. 2 more patrol cars turned into the lot at that moment, tires crunching loudly over gravel. "Back up." Grant didn't look surprised. He didn't even turn. But the energy shifted instantly. 4 officers now, against 2 men standing in the sun. The imbalance was obvious, deliberate, calculated. Leon's chest rose and fell once, deeper than before. "Seriously?" he muttered under his breath. Ethan didn't respond. Grant smiled slightly, satisfaction creeping back into his expression. "Now," he said, louder, so everyone could hear, "I'm going to give you one last chance." He stepped closer again, close enough that there was no space left between words and consequence. "You leave," he said. "Right now." A pause. "Or this gets worse." The porch behind them had gone completely still. No shifting, no movement. Just eyes, watching, waiting. Ethan stood there, unmoved. The heat pressed in from all sides. The weight of the moment settled. And then, very slowly, he shook his head. "No," he said. The word was quiet, but it landed like something final. Grant's smile disappeared. Completely. His hand tightened on his belt, and for the first time since he walked into that diner, he looked uncertain. Just for a second. But it was there. A crack, small, barely visible, but real. What happens when power meets someone who isn't afraid of it? Because they've already seen how it ends. The crack didn't last. It never does. Grant Miller straightened his posture, rolling his shoulders back as if shaking off something he didn't want to feel. Whatever doubt had flickered in his eyes disappeared just as quickly as it came, replaced by something harder, something louder. He wasn't going to lose control, not here, not in front of them, not in front of anyone watching. "Turn around," he said again, sharper this time. Ethan didn't argue. He turned, slow, deliberate, hands visible at all times. Leon followed, a fraction slower, his movements tighter, like every muscle in his body was working against instinct. "Hands behind your back," Grant ordered. Ethan clasped his hands loosely behind him. Leon hesitated, just for a second. Then he did the same. The gravel shifted under their feet as Grant stepped closer, the sound of his boots grinding against it echoing louder than it should have. Behind him, the other officers spread out, forming a loose semicircle, not touching, not speaking, but present, watching, backing him, or at least not stopping him. Grant began the pat-down. Rough. Not violent, but not respectful either. His hands moved quickly over Ethan's sides, across his back, down his arms. Searching, but not really searching. As if the point wasn't to find something, but to remind. Ethan stayed still. Eyes forward, breathing steady. The heat pressed down on his neck, sweat tracing a slow line down his spine. But he didn't move, didn't react, didn't give Grant anything. Grant moved to Leon next. Leon's jaw tightened again, as the hands came down harder this time, more aggressive, more deliberate. "Relax," Grant muttered, "unless you've got something to hide." Leon didn't answer, didn't move, but his breathing changed. Deeper, controlled, like he was holding something back with everything he had. Grant finished and stepped back, pulling off a pair of thin gloves and tossing them aside into the gravel like they were nothing. "Phones," he said. Ethan didn't turn. "Why?" he asked. Grant smirked. "Because I said so." Ethan paused, then slowly reached into his pocket, every movement visible, every motion deliberate. He pulled out his phone and held it loosely at his side. Leon did the same. Grant took them both, glancing at the screens, then flipping them over in his hand like he expected something to jump out at him. "Locked," he said. "Personal property," Ethan replied calmly. Grant's smirk deepened. "Not anymore." He walked over to the hood of the patrol car and dropped both phones onto it. The sound was sharp, hollow, echoing across the lot. Neither Ethan nor Leon reacted. Grant turned back. "You're going to unlock those," he said. "No," Ethan replied. The word came faster this time, still calm, still controlled, but firm. Grant tilted his head. "Oh, you think you get to say no?" he asked. Ethan didn't respond. Grant stepped closer again. "You really don't understand where you are, do you?" he said quietly. Ethan finally turned his head slightly. "I understand perfectly," he replied. Something about the way he said it, steady, certain, made Grant pause again. Just for a fraction. Then he pushed through it. He always did. Grant turned away, pacing a few steps across the gravel, then back again, as if building momentum. "You know what happens next?" he said loudly, addressing not just them, but everyone within earshot. Nobody answered. "You sit in a cell," he continued, "until we figure out who you really are." Leon's head turned slightly now. "That's not legal," he said. Grant laughed. "Legal?" he repeated. "You want to talk about legal?" He stepped closer again, his voice rising. "I can hold you for 48 hours while we sort this out," he said. "And by the time anyone cares, you'll be long gone from here." Silence. No one on the porch spoke. No one stepped forward. The world shrank down to the sound of gravel under boots, distant traffic, and the quiet rhythm of two men breathing under pressure. Grant pointed toward their car again. "Let's try this again," he said. "Pop the doors. I'm taking a closer look." Ethan didn't hesitate this time. He pressed the key fob again. The doors unlocked with a soft click. Grant moved in immediately, opening the passenger side, leaning in, searching deeper this time. Glove compartment, center console, under the seats. His movements were faster now, more aggressive, less patient. He pulled out papers, flipped through them, tossed them back. A receipt, a map. Nothing, always nothing. Leon watched from where he stood, hands still behind his back. "You're not going to find anything," he said quietly. Grant didn't look up. "That's not how this works," he replied. He kept searching, harder, faster. Like if he just pushed far enough, something would appear to justify everything. But nothing did, because there was nothing. Grant slammed the car door shut, the sound echoing sharply. He stood there for a moment, breathing a little heavier now, then turned back. Something had changed. Not in Ethan, not in Leon, in him. Frustration. It was there now, clear, visible. And that made him more dangerous. He walked back slowly, stopping just in front of Ethan again. "You know what I hate?" he said. Ethan didn't answer. Grant leaned in slightly. "I hate people who think they're smarter than me," he said. Ethan met his gaze. "I don't think that," he replied. Grant's jaw tightened. "Yeah," he said. "I think you do." He stepped back, running a hand over his face, then letting it fall to his belt again. The officers behind him shifted slightly, exchanging glances now. Not stepping in, not stopping anything, but noticing. That crack from before, it was still there, small, but spreading. Grant took a breath, then exhaled slowly, and made a decision. "Turn around," he said again. Ethan and Leon didn't move. "I said turn around." This time his hand dropped to the cuffs. Metal glinted in the sunlight. The moment stretched, thin, tight, ready to snap. Ethan's voice came quietly. "On what charge?" Grant didn't hesitate. "Obstruction," he said. "Failure to comply." Neither of those words fit, and everyone knew it, but no one said it. Ethan nodded slightly, like he expected that answer, like it confirmed something. Leon shifted again, tension rising back into his shoulders. This time Ethan didn't stop him. Not yet. Grant stepped forward, cuffs in hand. The distance between them closed, and somewhere in the reflection of the patrol car window, something flickered, something small, something easy to miss, but not gone. If power keeps pushing, what happens when it finally hits something it can't move? The glint of metal in Grant Miller's hand caught the sun just right. Cuffs, simple, cold, final. He stepped closer, each movement slower now, more deliberate, like he wanted the moment to stretch, like he wanted everyone watching to feel it. "You made your choice," he said. Ethan didn't move. Leon's shoulders tightened, his weight shifting just slightly from one foot to the other. Not stepping forward, not backing away, just bracing. "Turn around," Grant repeated. This time his voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried certainty, authority, the kind that expected obedience without question. Ethan stood there for a moment longer, then slowly turned his body, placing himself parallel to the patrol car again. His hands stayed relaxed at his sides, not raised, not defensive, just present. Leon followed, but there was a difference now, a tightness in his movement, a barely contained energy that pulsed under the surface. Grant stepped behind Ethan first, close enough to reach, close enough to claim control. The other officers shifted slightly, forming a wider arc now, their shadows stretching across the gravel like long lines drawn in the dirt. From the porch, someone whispered something too low to hear. Another voice shushed it immediately. Still, no one stepped forward. Still, no one said, "That's enough." Grant reached out. His hand hovered for a second over Ethan's wrist. Then, he stopped. It was subtle, barely noticeable. But it happened. His fingers didn't close. Not yet. Something held him there. Maybe it was the stillness. Maybe it was the way Ethan hadn't flinched once. Maybe it was the way this moment didn't feel like the others he'd controlled so easily before. But whatever it was, it slowed him. For just a second. Ethan spoke into that second. "Are you sure this is how you want to handle this?" The question was quiet, almost gentle, but it landed harder than anything else so far. Grant's hand tightened in the air. "You don't get to ask questions," he said. Ethan didn't turn, didn't raise his voice. "I'm just giving you a chance," he said. Leon's eyes shifted toward Ethan now, confusion flickering across his face. A chance? For him? Grant let out a short, sharp laugh. "You think I need a chance?" he said. "No," Ethan replied. "I think you might want one." That did it. Whatever hesitation had been there snapped. Grant grabbed Ethan's wrist, not violently, but firmly, enough to make a point, enough to cross the line completely. Leon's head turned fast. "That's enough," he said, his voice low but edged now. Grant ignored him. He pulled Ethan's arm back slightly, reaching for the cuffs with his other hand. Metal clicked. The sound was small, but it cut through everything. From the porch, Megan gasped before she could stop herself. Grant's head turned toward the sound, eyes narrowing for just a fraction of a second. Then back to Ethan. "Last warning," he said. But it wasn't a warning anymore. It was already happening. Leon took a step forward. Just one. The gravel shifted under his foot, loud in the silence. Immediately, two of the other officers stepped closer, hands near their belts. Not drawn, not escalated, but ready. A line, drawn again. Leon stopped, his fists clenched, unclenched, his breathing sharp now. "Don't do this," he said. This time it wasn't for Grant. It was for Ethan, but Ethan didn't respond. Grant leaned closer to Ethan's ear. "You should have just left," he muttered. Ethan's voice came back just as quiet. "You should have just let us eat." Another pause, short, tight, then Ethan moved. Not fast, not sudden, deliberate. He shifted his free hand slowly toward his jacket. Grant reacted instantly. "Don't," he snapped, his grip tightening. Every officer around them went still. Every eye locked onto that movement. Leon froze where he stood, muscles coiled, ready to explode or collapse. No middle ground left. Ethan didn't stop. "Easy," he said, calm as ever. 2 fingers. Only 2. He slipped them into his jacket pocket. Grant's other hand dropped closer to his belt again, instincts firing. "Don't reach," he warned. "I'm not," Ethan said. But he was. Slowly, carefully, deliberately. Time stretched. The heat pressed down harder. The world narrowed to that one movement. That one decision. That one moment that would decide everything that came next. From inside the diner, a chair scraped loudly. Someone stood up, finally. But it was too late. Or maybe it was right on time. Ethan's fingers closed around something inside his jacket. He pulled it out. Slow, controlled. And for a brief, suspended second, no one knew what it was. Grant's grip tightened again. His breath caught. Every officer behind him tensed. Leon held his breath completely, and the entire world seemed to wait for what would be revealed next. What if the moment you think you're in control is the exact moment everything slips away? Ethan's hand emerged from his jacket slowly. No sudden movement, no threat, just a measured, deliberate motion that seemed almost out of place in a moment stretched so tight it could snap. Between his fingers, a wallet. Plain, black, worn just enough to look ordinary. Grant's grip didn't loosen. Not yet. "What is that?" he demanded. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He let the silence breathe. Let every pair of eyes, on the porch, behind the glass, behind the badges, focus on that one small object. Then, with the same calm that had carried him through every second before this, he flipped it open. The sunlight caught something inside. Gold, sharp, unmistakable. Grant's eyes dropped to it and froze. For a second, just 1 second, his mind didn't process what he was seeing. It didn't fit, didn't align with the story he had already decided was true. But reality doesn't ask for permission. It just arrives. "Sergeant Grant Miller," Ethan said, his voice no longer just calm, but authoritative now. Steady in a way that didn't bend. "My name is Ethan Brooks." A pause. Senior Investigator, Internal Affairs Division. The words landed clean, precise, final. Grant didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. The cuffs in his hand loosened, the metal shifting slightly as his fingers lost tension. Behind him, one of the other officers shifted his weight. Then another. A ripple. Leon moved next. He reached into his own jacket, slow, controlled, mirroring Ethan's earlier movement, and pulled out his credentials, flipped them open, held them up. Leon Carter, he said, Internal Affairs. No raised voice, no anger, just fact. The world tilted, not physically, but in something deeper, something harder to recover from. Grant's hand dropped away from Ethan's wrist completely. The space between them widened. Not by distance, but by reality. This, Grant started, but the word broke before it could finish. His voice had changed, lost its edge, lost its certainty. Ethan lowered the wallet slightly, but didn't close it. Everything you've said, he continued, everything you've done since you walked into that diner. He glanced toward the porch, toward the people who were no longer pretending not to watch, has been documented. Grant's eyes flicked toward the patrol car, toward the hood, toward the phones he had tossed there like they didn't matter. Leon reached over and picked one up, turned it over. The screen lit up. A small red icon blinked steadily in the corner. Recording. Audio, Leon said quietly. Video. Ethan nodded slightly. Time-stamped, he added. Grant took a step back, then another. The gravel shifted loudly under his boots this time. No longer controlled, no longer deliberate. Just movement. Now wait, he said quickly. Hold on a second. This isn't what it looks like. The words came faster now. Too fast. Like he was trying to outrun something already catching up. Ethan closed his wallet slowly. That's exactly what it looks like, he said. Grant shook his head. No, I was just doing my job. I had reasonable suspicion. What suspicion? Ethan cut in. Not loud, not aggressive, but sharp. Enough to stop him. Grant's mouth opened, then closed. He searched for something. Anything. That would make it sound different. Sound right. But there was nothing there. Because there had never been anything there. Behind him, one of the other officers took a step back. Then another, creating space, distance, from him, from what had just happened. Leon's eyes moved across them. Not accusing, not angry, just seeing. One of the deputies looked down at the ground, his shoulders tightening. Another turned slightly, facing away like he didn't want to be part of what came next. The porch wasn't quiet anymore. Not completely. Low murmurs started to rise. Voices, questions, disbelief. Megan stepped down off the porch now. One cautious step at a time, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be closer, but couldn't stay back anymore either. Grant noticed, and for the first time, he looked alone, not surrounded by support, not backed by authority, just exposed. You should have told me, he said suddenly, his voice lower now, almost pleading. Ethan looked at him. We tried to eat breakfast, he replied. The words landed harder than anything else, because they were simple, because they were true. Grant swallowed, his throat dry, his hands empty now. The cuffs hung loosely at his side. Pointless. He glanced at the other officers again. None of them met his eyes. The crack had spread. Wider now, visible, irreversible. Ethan stepped forward slightly. Not aggressive, not threatening, but enough to reclaim the space. From this point forward, he said, you're going to listen carefully. Grant nodded automatically. He didn't even realize he had. Leon stepped beside Ethan, holding the recording device up just enough for it to be seen clearly. The red light blinked again. Steady, unstoppable, and somewhere far off, in the distance, a siren began to rise. Faint at first, then louder, coming closer. Grant's head turned toward the sound, then back to Ethan, and for the first time since he walked into that diner, he understood, not just what was happening, but what was coming, and there was nothing left he could do to stop it. When the truth finally steps forward, who stands with it, and who tries to step back? The sirens grew louder, not rushed, not chaotic, measured, professional, the kind of sound that didn't need urgency to carry weight. Grant Miller stood in the middle of the gravel lot, no longer the center of control, but the center of attention. And that was a very different place to be. He glanced toward the road again, then back at Ethan. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said quickly, his voice searching for steadiness that wasn't there anymore. Ethan didn't respond right away. He simply watched him. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. You ordered us out of a public business without cause, Ethan said finally. You detained us. You searched our vehicle. You made statements that suggest bias. Each word landed like a step being documented, because it was. Grant shook his head a little too fast. No, that's not. I was responding to a situation. I had reason to believe. What reason? Leon asked. His voice was quiet, but it carried something new now. Not tension, not restraint, authority. Grant looked at him, then away. There was no answer that would hold. No explanation that would erase what had already been said. Behind them, the diner door opened wider. People stepped out now, not just watching from behind glass anymore. An older man in a faded cap moved down the steps slowly, his boots hitting the wooden porch with a dull thud. He stopped at the edge, hands resting at his sides. Megan followed, a few steps behind him. Her eyes moved from Ethan to Leon, then to Grant, and stayed there. The silence that had once protected him was gone, replaced by something else, something heavier. Recognition. Grant noticed it, and it unsettled him more than the badges ever could. You're making this bigger than it is, he said, trying to reclaim something, anything. This is routine, happens all the time. Leon's eyes flicked toward the people now gathered. That's the problem, he said. Grant's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, 2 black sedans turned into the lot, unmarked, clean. They didn't rush in, didn't throw lights, didn't make a scene. They simply arrived. Doors opened. 4 individuals stepped out. Plain clothes, but unmistakable presence. Their movements were coordinated, precise, like people who had done this before, because they had. Ethan didn't turn to greet them. He didn't need to. One of them, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled tight at the back, walked straight towards him. Investigator Brooks, she said. Agent Marsh, Ethan replied with a slight nod. Professional, contained, no dramatics. She turned her attention to Grant. Her eyes didn't carry anger. They carried assessment. Officer Grant Miller, she said. Grant didn't answer immediately. His posture shifted, uncertain now, caught between habit and reality. That's me, he said finally. Agent Marsh nodded once. You are being relieved of active duty pending investigation, she said. The words were calm, clinical, but they landed heavier than anything shouted earlier. Grant blinked. "What?" he said. "You will surrender your weapon, badge, and department-issued equipment," she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. Grant took a step back. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You can't just—" "We can," she replied. Not louder, just final. The other agents moved in quietly. Not aggressive, not forceful, just present. Grant looked around, at the officers who had stood behind him minutes ago, at the people from the diner, at the space where his authority used to sit. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody backed him. Not anymore. His hand hovered near his belt again, not reaching, just unsure where to go. "Officer," Agent Marsh said, her tone unchanged. "Your weapon." The moment stretched. Grant hesitated. Then slowly, too slowly, he reached for the holster at his side, unclipped it, removed the firearm, held it for a second, like it still meant something, then handed it over. The agent beside Marsh took it without comment. "Badge," she said next. Grant swallowed, removed it. The metal caught the sunlight one last time before disappearing into another hand. Keys. Another pause, another hesitation, then compliance. One by one, the pieces of authority were taken. Not stripped, not forced, given, because there was no other option left. The porch was completely silent now. Not the old silence, not the kind that hides. This one watched, witnessed, remembered. Ethan stepped forward slightly, his hands now free at his sides. He looked at Grant, really looked at him. For the first time, there was no barrier between them. No illusion, just truth. "We didn't come here for you," Ethan said. Grant looked up, confusion flickering across his face. "Then why—" he started. Ethan cut him off gently. "We came here for what happens when people think no one is watching." Grant's expression shifted. Something in it cracked. Not anger, not defiance, something closer to realization. Leon stepped beside Ethan. "And now," he added quietly, "everyone is." From the porch, the older man removed his cap slowly, held it in his hands. A gesture, small but meaningful. Megan took another step forward, closer than before. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've seen this before," she said. Grant didn't look at her, but he heard it. Everyone did. Agent Marsh turned slightly. "You'll have the opportunity to give a statement," she said to Grant. "Right now, you're coming with us." Two agents stepped beside him, not grabbing, not forcing, just guiding. Grant didn't resist. Not anymore. As they walked him toward the sedan, the gravel crunched louder than before, every step echoing, every movement recorded in the minds of those watching. Ethan remained where he stood, still, composed. The heat hadn't changed. The light hadn't changed. But everything else had. Leon let out a slow breath beside him. "That's it?" he asked quietly. Ethan looked toward their diner, at the people now standing outside, at the ones who hadn't spoken before, and the ones who might now. "It's a start," he said. Behind them, the sedan door closed, and the sound was final. When silence breaks, does it free people, or does it reveal how long they've been afraid to speak? The sedan pulled away slowly, tires grinding over gravel, carrying Grant Miller with it. No sirens, no spectacle, just a quiet removal that felt heavier than any public arrest ever could. For a moment, nobody moved. Not Ethan, Not Leon, not the officers who remained, not the people gathered on the porch. The space that Grant had occupied lingered, like a shadow that hadn't yet caught up to reality. Then something shifted. A low murmur rolled through the crowd, uncertain at first, like people testing their own voices after holding them back too long. The older man in this faded cap stepped down from the porch fully this time. His boots hit the gravel with a firm, deliberate sound. He didn't look at Ethan or Leon right away. He looked at the empty space where Grant had stood. "I've seen him do that before," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried, because it was the first voice that didn't pretend anymore. Megan swallowed hard, her hands still trembling slightly at her sides. "I have too," she added quietly, "not like this, but close." Her eyes flicked toward Ethan, then quickly away, like she wasn't sure she had the right to meet his gaze now. Another man stepped forward from behind her, younger, wearing a mechanic's shirt with grease stains on the sleeves. "My cousin," he said, "last summer. Said he looked suspicious. Pulled him over for nothing." He shook his head. Nobody did anything. Leon turned slightly, taking it in. Not with satisfaction, but with something quieter. Recognition. Ethan stood still, listening. That was all he did. He didn't interrupt, didn't lead, didn't push. Because this part didn't belong to him. The silence had broken. And now it was filling itself. One voice at a time. "I thought about saying something," Megan said, her voice cracking slightly. "When he came in, when he told you to leave." She paused, looked down at her hands. I didn't." Ethan finally spoke. "You're saying something now," he said. She looked up at him. There was no judgment in his expression, no accusation, just truth. And somehow, that made it harder. The older man nodded slowly. "He's been doing it for years," he said. "People passing through, folks who don't know how things work around here." Leon's jaw tightened slightly. "That's the problem," he said again. But this time, it wasn't directed at Grant. It was directed at all of it. The system, the silence, the understanding that had allowed it to continue. One of the remaining deputies shifted his weight awkwardly, clearing his throat. "I didn't," he started, then stopped. All eyes turned toward him. He looked down at the ground. "I didn't agree with what he said," he muttered. No one responded. The air held that statement for what it was. Not enough. Ethan turned his head slightly, looking at him. "But you stood there," he said. The deputy didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He just nodded. "Yeah," he said. Leon let out a slow breath. "That's how it keeps happening," he said. Another silence followed. But it was different now. Not protective, not hiding. This one faced something, acknowledged it. Agent Marsh stepped forward again, her attention shifting from Grant, now gone, to the people left behind. "We'll be taking statements," she said. "Anyone who witnessed what happened today, or anything similar in the past." She let that settle. "This is your opportunity." The word hung in the air. Opportunity. Not pressure, not demand, a choice. Megan stepped forward first. "I'll talk," she said. Her voice shook, but she didn't step back. The older man nodded. "Me too." The mechanic raised a hand slightly. "Yeah, I will." One by one, small decisions started to form. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. Leon glanced at Ethan. "You think they'll follow through?" he asked quietly. Ethan watched the group, the hesitation, the courage, the weight of both. "Some will," he said. Leon nodded. "That's enough?" Ethan took a moment before answering. Then, "It's how it starts." The heat hadn't let up. The sunlight still pressed down across the lot, casting long shadows that stretched toward the diner. But something else had changed. Something less visible. The space felt different. Not lighter, not easier, but open, like something that had been sealed tight for years had finally cracked. And through that crack, voices were beginning to come through. Leon exhaled slowly. "Man," he muttered, almost to himself. "All this, just from breakfast." Ethan allowed the faintest hint of a smile. "It was never just breakfast," he said. Behind them, the diner door creaked again as more people stepped out, drawn not by curiosity anymore, but by something closer to responsibility. Megan moved toward the steps, then paused, turning back. "Hey," she said. Ethan looked at her. "Are you coming back inside?" she asked. The question lingered. Simple, but layered with everything that had happened. Ethan glanced at Leon, then back at the diner, at the booth by the window, at the place where it had all started. "Yeah," he said. And for the first time since they walked in, it didn't feel like a challenge, it felt like a choice. When people finally stop looking away, can a place really change? Or does it just begin to show what it always was? The bell above the diner door rang again as Ethan pushed it open. This time the sound didn't disappear into silence. It lingered. People turned, but they didn't look away, not anymore. The same red vinyl booths, the same worn counter, the same chipped coffee mugs lined up like they had been for years. But something inside the room had shifted, subtle but undeniable. The air didn't press down the same way. It didn't hide anything anymore. Ethan walked back to the corner booth, the one by the window, the one where it started. Leon followed, slower this time, glancing around, not scanning for exits, not measuring risk, just seeing, really seeing. People watched them sit, not with suspicion, not with discomfort, but with something closer to awareness. Megan approached, her steps uncertain at first, then steadier as she reached the table. She started, then stopped. Ethan looked up at her. "It's okay," he said. She nodded quickly, like she needed permission to breathe. "Your food's still warm," she said. "I mean, I can make it fresh if you want." Ethan glanced at the plates. The pancakes had gone slightly cold, edges stiffening, the eggs untouched. He picked up his fork. "This is fine," he said. Leon let out a small breath beside him. "Yeah," he added. "It's fine." Megan hesitated. Then she leaned in just slightly. "I'm sorry," she said. The words came out soft, barely louder than a whisper, but they carried weight, not just for what had happened, but for everything before it. Ethan met her eyes. "I know," he said. And he did. That was the thing. He didn't need her to explain, because this wasn't new. It was just seen now. She nodded once, then stepped away. Behind the counter, conversations began to rise again, but not like before. Quieter, more careful, less certain. The older man from outside took his seat again at the counter. But this time he didn't stare at his plate. He looked up, at Ethan, at Leon, then gave a small nod. Not dramatic, not loud, but real. Leon noticed. "Guess we're not invisible anymore," he muttered. Ethan cut into his pancakes, the fork moving slow and steady. "No," he said. "We never were." Leon leaned back slightly, letting that sit. Outside, the unmarked cars were still there. Agents moved in and out of view, speaking with witnesses, taking notes, collecting statements. What had been one moment was now something bigger, something spreading. Megan returned with a fresh pot of coffee, refilling their cups without asking this time. Her hands didn't shake anymore. "You guys from the city?" she asked carefully. Ethan nodded once. "Something like that." She hesitated. Then, "Is he going to lose his job?" Leon glanced at Ethan. Ethan set his fork down. "That depends," he said, "on what comes next." Megan frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Ethan looked toward the window, toward the people still gathered outside. "Today was one moment," he said, "but it's not the whole story." Leon leaned forward now, resting his forearms on the table, and "He didn't start today," he added. Megan's eyes dropped. "No," she said quietly. "He didn't." There it was again. Not denial, not avoidance, truth, simple, unprotected. A man at a nearby booth spoke up suddenly. "He pulled my brother over last year," he said. "Said his taillight was out." Another voice joined in. "Did the same thing to my nephew." A third. "My cousin, too." The diner filled, not with noise, but with something else. Stories, fragments, pieces of something that had always been there, just never spoken out loud in the same room at the same time. Leon looked around. "You hear that?" he said softly. Ethan nodded. "They're starting to connect it," he said. Outside, Agent Marsh stood with a small group, her posture straight, her attention focused, a notebook in her hand, a system beginning to form around what had once been isolated incidents. Inside, the line between past and present blurred, because once something is said out loud, it can't go back to silence. Megan leaned against the counter now, listening as people spoke, not interrupting, not avoiding, just staying. Leon picked up his coffee, took a slow sip, then set it down again. "You think this changes anything?" he asked. Ethan looked at the room, at the people who were no longer pretending, at the small shifts happening in real time. "It already has," he said. Leon nodded slightly, but his expression stayed thoughtful. "Yeah," he said, "for today." Ethan didn't argue, because he understood the question behind it, the weight of it. Change wasn't a moment. It was a process, and processes could stall, could fade, could disappear if no one carried them forward. He glanced again toward the window, toward the agents, toward the people speaking outside, toward the crack that had opened. "It depends on what they do next," he said. Leon followed his gaze. "And if they don't?" Ethan paused. Then it closes again." Silence settled over the table, not heavy, not uncomfortable, just honest. Megan set down the coffee pot, her eyes moving between them. "I'm not going to forget this," she said. Ethan looked at her. "Good," he replied, "because that was where it started. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with memory, with truth that stayed." Leon picked up his fork again, finally taking a bite. He chewed slowly, then nodded. "Still good," he said. Ethan allowed the faintest hint of a smile. Outside, a breeze moved through the lot, lifting dust into the sunlight. Inside, the diner carried on, but not the same way it had before. Not the same silence, not the same understanding. Something had shifted, and it wasn't going back. When the truth spreads beyond one moment, who carries it forward? And who lets it fade? The diner didn't return to normal. It couldn't. Even as plates were cleared and fresh coffee was poured, something stayed behind, like a mark you couldn't scrub out no matter how hard you tried. Ethan sat quietly, finishing the last of his meal. No rush, no urgency, just the same steady pace he'd carried from the beginning. Leon leaned back in the booth, arms folded loosely now, watching the room in a different way. Not scanning, not preparing, just observing. "You ever notice," Leon said, low enough that only Ethan could hear, "how things only change when somebody forces them to?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He wiped his hands with a napkin, folding it neatly before setting it down. "They don't get forced," he said finally. "They get revealed." Leon glanced at him. "That's not how it felt out there." Ethan nodded slightly. "Because it never feels like truth when you're in it," he said. "It feels like pressure." Leon let that sit. Across the room, Megan stood with another woman, older, maybe the owner, speaking in hushed tones. Their eyes kept drifting toward Ethan and Leon, not with fear, not with avoidance, but with something more complicated. Responsibility. Outside, the last of the agents were still gathering statements. A few people had already left, retreating back into whatever version of normal they were comfortable with. But others stayed, lingering, talking, thinking. That mattered. The door opened again, and a small girl stepped inside, holding her mother's hand, the same girl who had watched from the window earlier. Her eyes moved immediately to Ethan, then to Leon, curious, unfiltered. "Mom," she whispered, not quietly enough. "Are they in trouble?" The room stilled just slightly. Her mother hesitated. For a second, it looked like she might pull her away. "Say nothing," but then, "No," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "They're not." The girl nodded slowly, like she was filing that away somewhere important. Then she looked back at Ethan and smiled. It wasn't a big moment, not dramatic, but it mattered. Ethan returned the smile just slightly, because that was what changed things. Not just what happened outside, but what stayed inside. Leon noticed. "Future looks a little different already," he said. Ethan stood, reaching for his jacket. "Maybe," he replied. They stepped out of the booth together. No one stopped them. No one questioned them. But as they walked toward the door, something happened that hadn't happened before. People looked at them and didn't look away. The older man at the counter gave a small nod again. The mechanic raised his hand slightly in acknowledgement. Megan stepped forward as they reached the door. "Hey," she said. They paused. She took a breath. "I meant what I said earlier," she continued. "I'm not going to forget this." Ethan met her eyes. "I know," he said. She hesitated again. Then, "I should have said something sooner." The words came out heavier this time, more honest. Ethan considered that, then nodded. "Most people think that after," he said. Leon added quietly, "What matters is what you do next." She nodded. "I will," she said. This time it sounded different. Not uncertain, not fragile, resolved. Ethan pushed the door open. The bell rang again, but it didn't sound the same anymore. Outside, the heat had softened slightly. The sun had shifted, casting longer shadows across the gravel. The unmarked cars were gone now. The patrol car still sat where it had been, but it looked smaller somehow, less important. Leon glanced at it as they walked past. "Crazy," he said. "All that power, gone in a few minutes." Ethan stopped briefly beside the car, not touching it, just looking. "It wasn't gone," he said. "It was misused." Leon nodded. "Same difference." Ethan shook his head slightly. "No," he said, "because one can be fixed." Leon looked at him for a moment, then exhaled. "Guess that's your department." Ethan allowed a faint smile. "Something like that." They reached their car. Ethan paused with his hand on the door handle. He turned back one last time. The diner stood quiet again, but not silent, not the same way it had been before. There were voices inside now, movement, life that didn't hide. The sign above the door creaked slightly in the breeze. Nothing about the building had changed, but everything inside it had. Leon followed his gaze. "You think it sticks?" he asked. Ethan thought about it, about the voices, about the moment that had cracked something open. "It will," he said, "if they remember." Leon nodded slowly. "And if they don't?" Ethan opened the car door. "Then someone else will remind them." They got in. The engine started with a low hum. As they pulled out of the lot, the gravel shifted beneath the tires, the sound blending into the quiet rhythm of the road ahead. Behind them, the diner grew smaller, but it didn't disappear, because what happened there wouldn't either. When the moment passes and the world moves on, what part of the truth do you carry with you? And what part do you leave behind? 3 weeks later, the diner looked almost the same. Same faded sign out front. Same gravel lot. Same bell above the door that gave a soft, familiar jingle when it opened. But if you stood there long enough, really stood there, you could feel it. Something had shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, but permanent. Inside, the red vinyl booths had been patched where they'd torn. The counter gleamed a little cleaner. A fresh coat of paint brightened the walls just enough to notice without calling attention to itself. And above the corner booth by the window, there was a small wooden sign now. Simple, hand-carved. It read, "Everyone belongs here." Megan had hung it herself. Her hands had shaken when she nailed it in. Not from fear, from understanding. That booth wasn't just a place anymore. It was a reminder, a line that had been crossed, and one that wouldn't be ignored again. The morning crowd had changed too. Some of the old regulars still came in, taking their usual seats, ordering the same meals. But they spoke differently now, paused longer, looked up more often. And others, new faces, had started showing up. Travelers, families, people who might have once driven past without stopping. Now they came in and stayed. The bell rang again. Megan looked up out of habit, then froze. Ethan stepped inside. Same calm presence, same quiet way of taking in the room without making a show of it. Leon followed behind him, hands in his jacket pockets, a slight grin pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Well," he muttered, glancing around. "Looks like they've been busy." Ethan nodded once. "They have." Heads turned, but not the same way as before. No tension, no discomfort, just recognition. The older man at the counter lifted his hand in greeting. "Morning," he said. Ethan nodded back. "Morning." Megan walked toward them, slower this time, but not hesitant. More intentional. "You came back," she said. There was something in her voice. Not surprise, relief. Ethan gave a small smile. Figured we'd finish breakfast, he said. Leon chuckled softly. Hopefully it stays warm this time. Megan smiled, really smiled. I'll make sure of it, she said. They moved to the same booth, sat in the same seats. But everything felt different. The light coming through the window was softer now, filtered through a cleaner pane of glass. The dust that once floated in the air had settled. Or maybe it just didn't stand out anymore. Megan brought coffee first, set it down carefully. No charge, she said. Ethan shook his head. That's not necessary. She met his eyes. It is to me. A pause, then he nodded. Thank you. Around them, the diner carried on, but there was a rhythm to it now. A quiet awareness. People spoke, laughed, looked up when someone walked in. No one pretended not to see. Outside, a county vehicle passed slowly, not stopping, not watching, just passing. Leon noticed. Guess things changed faster than I thought, he said. Ethan stirred his coffee. They didn't change, he replied. They were forced to show themselves. Leon leaned back. Same thing, he said again. Ethan didn't argue this time, because maybe, just maybe, it was close enough. At the counter, the small girl from before sat beside her mother, swinging her legs under the stool. She spotted Ethan again. Her eyes lit up. She waved. Ethan waved back. Leon smiled to himself. Yeah, he said quietly. That part definitely changed. The food arrived. Hot, fresh, real. Ethan picked up his fork, paused for a moment, then took a bite. Leon watched him. Well? He asked. Ethan nodded once. Still good. Leon laughed. Good. Would have been a shame if all that work didn't fix the pancakes. They ate. Not as investigators, not as outsiders, just as two men having breakfast. And for the first time, that was enough. Outside, the wind shifted slightly, carrying dust across the lot before letting it settle again. The sign above the booth didn't move. Didn't need to, because its message had already done its job. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to start something. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Ethan finished his coffee and stood, reaching for his jacket. Leon followed. They walked toward the door again. The bell rang as Ethan pushed it open. Before stepping out, he paused. Just for a second. Looked back, at the booth, at the sign, at the people inside, not checking, not measuring, just seeing. Then he stepped outside. The sunlight met him again, warm and steady. Leon joined him, glancing back once more. You think it lasts? He asked. Ethan looked out across the road, at the town stretching beyond it, at everything that had been hidden, and everything that had been revealed. It can, he said. Leon nodded. And if it doesn't? Ethan opened the car door. Then someone else will sit in that booth. Leon smiled slightly. Yeah, he said, and finished their breakfast. They got in. The engine turned over, and as they drove away, the diner didn't disappear behind them. It stayed, not just as a place, but as a moment, a choice, a reminder that dignity isn't given. It's revealed, and once it is, it doesn't go back into hiding. If you were sitting in that diner that day, would you stay silent, or be the reason the silence finally breaks? Ethan Brooks didn't raise his voice, didn't fight back. He just sat down, finished his breakfast, and walked out with the truth following behind him. And somehow, that quiet moment in a worn-out diner ended up louder than anything that had happened before it. This story isn't about power and a badge. It's about the power of action over words. Because while everyone else stayed silent, Ethan didn't argue. He revealed. And that single moment of calm, controlled action changed everything around him. So today, think about this. Next time you see something that doesn't feel right, you don't need to shout. You don't need to fight. Just don't ignore it. Sometimes, the smallest act, standing still, asking one question, refusing to look away, is exactly what makes the truth impossible to hide, just like Ethan did. If this story stayed with you, comment 1. If you've ever witnessed something like this and didn't know what to do, comment 0. And tell me, what would you have done if you were sitting in that diner that day? Because the next story might hit even closer to home.